Hi, this is Trent from Speak2Read. I've been out sick for a bit. Hopefully my voice holds up for this video. I wanted to talk a little bit about my latest blog post. It's already up, so you can slide over and check it out at speak2read.ca. Head over to the blog. I love talking about children's learning profiles, and in thinking about a learning profile, I think what's really important is that whenever there is some kind of a breakdown or a performance deficit, you want to go looking for the source. There's always something at the source of performance, and really performing a careful task analysis to look at what a task requires to fulfill on it will allow you to then go in and look at what parts of that task were missing or where was the breakdown in relation to that task. And as part of our assessment, we really want to learn that as part of a child's learning profile so that we can really customize our therapies to make sure that we can start to add in whatever's missing and have them start to process that. And for an example, I wrote a blog post where I talk about the difficulties that we might see, some of the deficits that we might see in two different children. So in both children, I'm looking across difficulties in peer interactions and how they operate on the playground. And I'm also talking about reading comprehension and talking about writing. And we can also see some of the same things showing up in things like grammar and grammar use. And the two children that I talk about, one has ADHD and one has autism. And they both end up having difficulty in these tasks, in peer relationships, in reading comprehension, and in writing. But when you go in and look at the core deficit that is apparent in both of these diagnoses, you start to see that there's very different reasons why they struggle. And I just think it's so fascinating because there really is no one size fits all. It's like, oh, well, if this child's in grade 3 and has trouble with reading comprehension, we always want to come with our reading comprehension intervention. And we sort of like to try and pigeonhole things, pigeonhole kids and pigeonhole difficulties and say, well, we know what to do for reading comprehension. It's this package of these strategies or these books or these methodologies, and we're going to put that in front of the kid and they're going to learn to read. So I unpacked that a little bit in this blog. It's really kind of neat. If you think about a child on the playground with autism, often they have a lot of difficulty with perspective taking. And so they have a lot of difficulty trying to figure out what is fun for another child and what is it like for another child to play with me, you know? And when I always want to get my way, or I'm quite rigid about the rules of the game, or I have very specific ideas about the sequence of events and I'm inflexible about moving off of those, lots of times other children just get fed up. Children with autism often don't understand things like personal space and personal boundaries, so they may be getting too physical or getting too close or in too close a proximity. And it comes from, they don't like when people are in their space and they'll push kids to get back, but then they don't have the same understanding of the perspective that just as much as they don't like someone in their personal space, the other child also has the same dislike of people in their personal space. So while they will push kids when they come in their personal space, they're constantly and frequently getting into close proximity with the other kids and irritating other kids, which leads to some breakdowns on the playground and peer relationships. Conversely, when we look at something like ADHD, children with ADHD classically have a lot of difficulty with impulsivity and a lot of difficulty with inhibition. So they tend to have a very poor understanding of consequences. They have difficulty predicting consequences, so they get an idea and they act on it very quickly, which leads them to engage in sometimes risky behaviors or behaviors that might get kids in trouble. So sometimes other kids start to shy away from children with ADHD because they know that that child's breaking the rules and they don't want to get in trouble, or maybe they're worried that that kid's going to get hurt and they don't want to get hurt. Similarly, though, children with ADHD often are very impulsive in their personal space and in their boundaries. So they run up and they see somebody and they kind of want to give them a hug and they get right up in their personal space and there's inappropriate hugging. Or they have an idea that they want a roughhouse, and so they'll come up and they'll just tackle somebody, and that person's not expecting to get tackled, and they're not happy about that. And it really lies in the difficulty with inhibition and impulsivity and difficulty understanding the consequences, which is a completely different ballpark than a child with autism who simply doesn't understand the perspectives of another and how their behavior makes another person feel. Therefore, they're very two different approaches in how you want to go in and work on those social skills and those perspectives. And so I think it's really cool that you want to understand the learning profile, you want to do the task analysis, and you want to look at the source of the performance and look for the core deficit. And in autism and ADHD, they're very different core deficits, but we see perspective taking have a massive impact on children's ability with reading comprehension. as well as when they're writing. And when we write, we have to write for an audience, therefore you need the perspective of the audience, so you have to write to that. Children with ADHD often have a lot of trouble with writing and reading comprehension as well, but it's for completely different reasons, often in the attention, and especially the working memory really shows up, and then just the amount of language processing that's required in the writing task. There's so much information to keep online that you need to be able to operate with, that the processing really gets overloaded and the working memory gets overloaded, and you get breakdowns and difficulties there. So I just think it's really interesting stuff. That's why I love assessment. It's one of my favorite parts of my job. I love doing initial consultations with families so I can learn about their kids and start to make a hypothesis about what's going on and what we're going to learn if we do some assessment, and what is the key thing that we're going to build into therapy that's going to make all the difference. It's really cool. The more we can individualize things, the more of an impact we can have. We really have to start thinking outside of the box with kids and really seeing them as individual learners with individual profiles, as well as doing really clear task analysis to look, if a child's struggling with reading comprehension, where exactly is the breakdown? What parts of the reading comprehension process are they excelling at? What parts are they failing at? And then going into look at why and what's underlying that. Reading comprehension is a big overarching global construct. There's lots of places where we can break it down inside, looking at vocabulary, concept knowledge, linguistic relationships, language and vocabulary association, that association network, looking at perspective takings, looking at understanding characters' motivations, characters' intentions, connections to other stories that you've read, connecting to background knowledge, being able to visualize and verbalize. There's so many different things that can impact an activity like that it's really worth digging around in and figuring out what it is your child can and cannot do well, and in building in some supports. So anyway, that's what I've been writing about lately. The blog's already up. You can go over and have a look, and I look forward to talking to you again soon, and I hope to see you on the website, and more than anything, I really hope to see you here in my office. I love doing the free initial consultations with families and just hearing about children and where they excel and where they're struggling and who they are as learners, and we'll have to just provide some information to get us started. It's always insightful, I think, for parents, and then beyond that, we can usually build a plan that's going to make an impact moving forward. So it's free. I'm waiting for you. Come find me. Talk soon. Bye.